This video will show you how to enhance your validations using a simple scripting language called FormCalc. So if we click on our date field, notice there's a section at the bottom we didn't get to last time. This is the validation script message. Much like the validation pattern message, if you omit it, a default validation message will appear when the validation fails. But you can certainly override that and create your own message. You can also determine whether or not the user can override and ignore the error, or if we want them to correct it first. So if you check this error box, they must correct it. If you uncheck it, this message becomes a warning message that they can override. We're going to leave it as an error for this case. So like I said earlier, we have to use a language called FormCalc, and it's a very simple scripting language, much like the language that's used inside Excel spreadsheets. If you don't already have the script editor up, you can go to Window, Script Editor, or press Ctrl Shift F5 at the same time, and I'll bring up this editor. Now I've already been messing around with this, so it may look a little bit different than your screen. Two important things to note are the language, that the language is set to FormCalc. You can verify that because that also will appear here, and that the event we're overriding is the validate message, or the validate event. And we can click on that. Now the key to using FormCalc for the purposes of validation is to have an expression that will evaluate to either true or false. So I've thought up a very simple example where we will ask the user to put in the current date. So we can do that by using this function. $ means the current field, so date field 1. Just think $ would be replaced with date field 1 is equal to, so that's a double equals date. And date gets the current date in a numeric format. That's why we had to convert the left-hand side to a number. Just to show that this works. Didn't mean to do that. Show that this works. We're going to set the date to yesterday, and you'll note it says the value entered for this field is invalid. I cannot submit. But if I change it to the current day, I am allowed to submit. Like I said earlier, you can override this message. It would be nice to know exactly what I did wrong. Now I know exactly what I did wrong, and I can make the necessary corrections. One thing I wanted to show is how the validations bubble up, meaning which validation will appear first. Obviously, we could run into a situation where the user is required to enter the field. They're also required to match a certain pattern, and there's also a semantic constraint, which is that what they enter is the current date. Now we could, of course, tell them when they don't enter anything, they need to enter a value, that it doesn't match the pattern and it's not the current date. But really, we only need to fire one of those messages at a time. So, just to show that, the null test will fire first. So once we satisfy the null test, we can enter a date in the wrong format, and then it runs the pattern test And then if we meet the pattern test, then it will run the validation script test. So you can see that only one of the three messages will occur at any given time, even though we have three different types of validations applied to that particular field. This is useful because we don't want to overwhelm the user with seemingly contradictory validation messages. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to the correct. And now I can submit. Another thing we can do is we can make this a warning. If you uncheck error, it becomes a warning. If we hit OK, it will refire the message, but if we hit ignore, it will submit as is. I would say in most cases you want this to be an error message if you want to ensure that the form is correct when it is submitted to the server. In the next video, I'll show you various convenience functions you can use with FormCalc to accomplish very complicated